Vinnie's Talk. Welcome, guys. This is a new podcast here, episode 22 of Vinnie's Talk. I hope you guys were able to revisit some of my YouTube videos. I have quite a few of them. And today we are going to be going over a special podcast. The first broadcast was the Titanic overview. Today we are going to be doing the overview too. Vinnie's Talk. Next year will be the 109th anniversary of the Titanic sinking of the wonderful ship. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Titanic. I don't know if you guys seen the first overview to the Titanic. And today we're going to be talking about the background of the Titanic's name for you guys out there. The Titanic, drawings of the Greek mythology. Built in Belfast, Ireland, United Kingdom, and Great Britain and Ireland, it was then known the R.M.S. Titanic was the second of three Olympic-class ocean liners. The first was the R.M.S. Olympic, if you guys don't know what that is. That was a big ship too. Third was the H.M.H.S. Britannic. Britannic was originally to be called the Gigantic and was to be over 1,000 feet, 300 meters long. They were by far the largest vessels of the British shipping company, the White Star Line's fleet, which comprised 29 steamers and tenders in 1912. The three ships had their genesis and discussion in the mid-1907 between the White Star Line's chairman, J. Bruce Ismay. I don't know if you guys remember me talking about Mr. Ismay. He was very close with the captain of the ship, Mr. Edward Smith. So Bruce Ismay, the American financier J.P. Morgan, who controlled the White Star Line, parent corporation, International Marine Company. The White Star Line faced an increasing challenge from its main rivals, Cunard, which had recently lost, and the fastest passenger ships then in service, and then German lines, Hamburg, America, and Lloyd. Ismay preferred to compete on size rather than speed. Bruce Ismay, I don't know if you guys remember him in the Titanic movie. He was actually, he wanted the Titanic to be the fastest ship on sea. So these two theories about Mr. Ismay, I think they can kind of conspire with each other if you really read into it. The company sought out to upgrade in their fleet, primarily in response to Cunard, or whatever that's called, but also to replace the oldest pair of passenger ships still in service, being the SSS Titanic of 1889 and the Majestic of 1890. Wow. The ships were constructed by Belfast shipbuilders Harland and Wolff. We talked about Harland and Wolff in the last podcast. These two great families came together and built the Titanic, man, and in the shipyard in Belfast in Ireland. For those who had never been to Ireland, Ireland is a great country. Belfast is also a place where they filmed Game of Thrones, if you guys are not familiar with that. So the shipbuilders Harland and Wolff, who had a long-established relationship with White Star Line, dating moved back to 1867. Harland and Wolff were given a great deal of latitude in designing the ships. For White Star Line, usual approach was for the latter to sketch out a general concept which the former would take away and turn into a ship design. Cost considerations were relatively low on the agenda, and Harland and Wolff was authorized to spend it when it needed on the ships. Plus a 5% profit margin. In the case of the Olympic class ships, it cost of $3 million, approximately $290 million in 2016. Wow. For the first two ships was agreed, plus extras to contract and usual 5%. Harland and Wolff put their leading designers to work designing the Olympic class vessels. The design was overseen by Lord Pierre and director of both Harland and Wolff and the White Star Line, naval architect, Mr. Famous Thomas Andrews, the managing director of Harlan and Wolff's design department, Edward Wildling Andrews, deputy and responsible for calculating the ship's design, stability and trim, and Alexander Carla, pronounce his name, the shipyard's chief dronesman and general manager. Carlisle's responsibilities included the decorations equipment and all general arrangements, including implementation of efficient lifeboat design. Well, we already know that should have had well over 20 lifeboats, but it only was equipped with 20. Should have had more than that. Should have had at least 50, maybe more than that. On July 29th, 1908, Harlan and Wolff presented the drawings to J. Bruce, Mr. Ismay, and White Star Line executives. Ismay approved the design and signed 3 letters of agreement. 2 days later, authorizing the start of construction. At this point, the first ship was later to become the Olympic. Great ship, guys. Great ship. Had no name, but was referred to simply as number 400, as it was Harlan and Wolff's 400 hull. The Titanic was based on a revised version of the same design. It was given the number. Wow. Listen to this. Titanic was 882 feet, 9 inches, so 269.06 m, long with a maximum breadth, how do you say that, breadth? Of 92 feet and 6 inches. Her total height measured from the base of the Nile to the top of the bridge was 104 feet, 32 meters. She measured 46,328 gross registered tons. And with a draught of 34 feet and 7 inches, she displays 52,310 tons. Oh my. That is a lot of weight, folks. If you guys don't know about that, you look it up, man. That's a lot of weight in the water. Okay, so all 3 of the Olympic class ships had 10 decks, including the top of the officer quarters, 8 of which were for passenger use from the top, bottom, and the decks. Now let's go over some things with you guys. So the boat deck, let's go over the boat deck. The boat deck on which lifeboats were housed, and it was from during early hours of April 15th, 1912. The Titanic lifeboats were lowered into the Northern Atlantic Ocean. The bottom of the freaking Atlantic Ocean, the cold floor of the Northern Atlantic. Can you imagine being there at that rough time? I can. Anyways, the bridge and the wheelhouse were at the forward end in the front of the captain's and officer's quarters. The bridge stood 8 feet, 2.4 meters above deck, extending out to either side so that the ship could be controlled while docking. The wheelhouse stood within the bridge. The first class grand staircase and the gymnasium were located midships, along with the raised roof of the first class lounge. If you guys don't know where the grand staircase is on, actually you could find that on the Titanic movie where the beautiful Rose and Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet, when they were doing that whole like handshaking thing, that love stare or whatever you want to call it. That was the grand staircase right there. I call it the grand staircase stare. Okay. So basically the first couple decks of the Titanic were a lot of high-end cabins, a lot of lounges, a lot of gymnasiums. So if you were on the first class, you had a lot of time to work out. You had a lot of time to do a lot of things, man. You go to the gym, work out. You had the state-of-the-art fucking facilities. Couldn't you imagine being on the Titanic and having all these amenities and just being able to go and enjoying yourself? It's beautiful. It was beautiful, man. So the entrance to the first class, grand staircase, and gymnasium were located midship. The first class lounge, while at the rear of the deck, were the roof of the first class smoke room. Let me go get a joint and go puff on that baby right now. Because if I was on the Titanic, I'd be smoking hella weed. What, was weed allowed back then? I don't know. I don't even know if they were smoking weed back in those days. Probably not. Who knows? Maybe they were. The wood-covered deck was divided into 4 segregated promenades for officers, first-class passengers, engineers, and second-class passengers, respectively. So, lifeboats lined the side of the deck, except in the first-class area where there was a gap, so the view would not be spoiled. See, this is the problem I had with all these conceptions and them not having enough lifeboats. I feel like by them not having lifeboats, just because they wanted better views, so let's jeopardize having better views than having more life and saving more lives. That's what they did. Basically, that's what happened. So let's go over some of the decks, guys. I didn't really go in deep in depth in my last podcast. Well, we talked a little bit about, we did, however, talk about the decks, but this is more stuff that I wanted to get into. So A deck, also called promenade deck, extended along the entire 546 feet. That's long. Length of a superstructure. It was reserved exclusively for the first-class passengers and contained first-class cabins, the first-class lounge, smoke room, reading and writing rooms, and palm court. There you had access to all these beautiful, wonderful amenities for the first-class passengers. How beautiful is that? Okay, so let's go to B deck. B deck, the bridge deck, was a top weight bearing deck in the utmost level of hall. More first-class passenger accommodations were located here within 6. What does that say? Staterooms, cabins, featuring their own private promenades on Titanic. And the a la carte restaurant, everything is a la carte. A la carte restaurant and the cafe provided luxury dining facilities to first-class passengers. Man, people in first class were living it up, man. For real. Both were run by subcontracted chiefs and their staff. All were lost in the disaster. All these people were gone, man. Lost at sea. Wow. Second-class smoking room and entrance hall were both located in this deck. The raised forecastle of the ship was forward of the bridge deck, accommodating number hatch. The main hatch to the cargo holds numerous pieces of machinery and the anchor housings. After the bridge deck was the raised poop, they call it poop deck, 106 feet, 32 m, long used as promenade by third class passengers. It was there many of Titanic's passengers and crew made that their last stand as the ship sank. The forecastle and poop deck were separated from the bridge. So guys, that was a lot about B deck that I didn't really know until I just read all that. B deck was wow, very strong deck. Okay, so C deck. C deck, the shelter deck, was the highest deck to run uninterrupted from the stem to the stern. For those who don't know what the stern is the back of the ship. So people, when the Titanic was going down from the bow, the bow was taking on so much water, so people would run up through the stem, up through all the way to the stern. That means they're running like this as the ship's coming up like this, and they're just running up until they get to the stern. It's crazy. Included both well decks. The aft one served as part of the third class promenade. Crew cabins were housed below the forecastle, and third class public rooms were housed below the poop deck. I don't know if we read that, did we? Maybe we did. D deck and the saloon deck was dominated by 3 large public rooms: the first class reception room and first class dining saloon, and the second class dining saloon. An open space was provided for the third class passengers. First, second, third class passengers had cabins on this deck with berths for firemen located in the bow. So they were in the bow, they were in the front of the ship. It was the highest level reached by the ship's watertight bucket heads, though only by 8 of the 15 bucket heads. Let's go to E deck. E deck, guys. E deck, the upper deck was predominantly used for passenger accommodation for all the 3 classes, plus berths for cooks, seamen, stewards, and trimmers. Along in its length ran a long passageway nicknamed Scotland Road, in reference to a famous street in Liverpool. Scotland Road was used by the third class passengers and crew members. let's go to F deck. Everybody's like, well, what is that? F deck, the middle deck, was the last complete deck and mainly accommodated second and third class passengers and several departments of the crew. Oh yeah. The third class dining saloon was located here, as were the swimming pool, they call it the Turkish bath. The Turkish bath and kennels. So there was dogs on board, guys. A lot of dogs. There was some dogs. G deck and the lower deck was the lowest complete deck that carried passengers and held the lowest portholes, just above the water line. Here, okay, the water line. The squash court was located here, along with traveling post office, where letters and parcels were sorted ready for delivery when the ship docked. Food was also stored here. The deck was interrupted at several partial decks over the boiler engine and turbine rooms. Wow. Those they call it the overload decks. And the tank top. Below that were on the lowest level of the ship, below the waterline, the decks were used as cargo spaces. So there was a lot of, in these cargo areas, there was a lot of old school, like, really nice cars, you know, like classic cars back in the 1900s. They had all these beautiful classic cars underneath for the cargo. And as you guys see the James Cameron film, they had they made that love scene or whatever. But these are some of the compartments that were first being hit and first being flooded by the water that was entering the Titanic when the ship was hit, when she hit. So the area of the ship was occupied by the engine and the boiler rooms, which passengers would have been prohibited from seeing. They were connected with higher levels of the ship. Flights of stairs, twin spiral stairways near the bow provided access to the upper D deck. Wow. See, these are some of the things that I didn't know, and it's very interesting to read because you learn a lot when you read. You know that. So we're going to learn a little bit about the Titanic's power, as we talked a little bit about on the last podcast, if you guys watched it, how the ship was powered by steam, and men were working hard in the boiler rooms. So let's talk to you guys a little bit about the power in the Titanic. So the Titanic was equipped with 3 main engines. Ooh, almost lost control of the mic there. The Titanic was equipped, let's move over. The Titanic was equipped with 3 main engines, 2 rating 4-cylinder triple expansion steam engines. That's a lot of work to keep these bad boys going. And 1 certainly placed low pressure partitionable turbines, each driving a propeller. The 2 recuperating engines had combined output of 30,000 horsepower. Wow. The output of the steam turbine was 16,000 horsepower. The White Star Line had used the same combination of engines on an earlier liner called the SS Loranic, where it had been a great success. It had provided a good combination of performance, speed. The reciprocating engines by themselves were not enough power to propel the Olympic-class liner at the desired speeds, while turbines were sufficiently powerful by cause uncomfortable vibrations and a problem that affected all turbine liners. Wow. By combining engines with turbine fuel, usage could be reduced and motive power increased while using the same amount of steam. So if you think about it, it took a lot of guys, a lot of manpower to keep these engines going. And when she hit the iceberg, water was filling up really fast. So they had to work, not only did they had to work hard, they had to work extra harder. See, and in here it even talks about, I'll just read it. They were heated by burning coal, 6,611 tons of which could be carried in Titanic's bunkers, with further 1,092 tons in hold 3. The furnaces required over 600 tons of coal a day to be shoveled into them. So, like I said, a lot of work, a lot of manpower. And guys, there was a lot of men down there working. and this is by hand. So requiring the services 176 firemen working around the clock. 100 tons of ash a day had to be disposed by ejecting it into the sea. The work was relentless, dirty, and dangerous. Although firemen were paid relatively generously, there was a high suicide rate among those who worked in this capacity. And I don't know if you know, if you go check out this documentary called Saving the Titanic. Some of these men that worked down there, they actually had to work double shifts. Some of them were working 10 hours a day, and the captain had asked, I believe in this documentary, one of the guys to work a double shift. And man, working a double shift down there was crazy. All right, guys, let's see what else we could read. Let's talk a little bit about lifeboats, and I'm sure you guys know in the last podcast with the lifeboats, and you know how many there were, how many should have been on there. So like the Olympic, the Titanic carried a total of 20 lifeboats, which would be a cap of 60 people on each lifeboat. They didn't fill them all up. And 14 standard wooden Harlan and Wolff lifeboats, a cap of 65 people each. 4 Earnhardt collapsible wooden boats, and identified as A to D with a cap of 47 people. In addition, she had 2 emergency cutters with a cap of 40 people. Olympic carried at least 2 collapsibles boats on either side of her number 1 funnel. All of the lifeboats were stowed securely on the boat deck, and except for collapsible lifeboats A and B connected to davits by ropes, those on the starboard side, those who don't know what starboard side is, it's the right side. Starboard. When you hear starboard, you think right. That's the right answer. On the starboard side were odd number 1 through 15, bow to stern, while those on the port side were even number 2 to 16 from bow to stern. Port side is the left side, ladies and gentlemen. Both cutters were kept swung out, hanging from the divots, ready for immediate use, while collapsible lifeboats C and D stowed on the boat deck, connected to the davits. Immediately on board of boat 1 and 2, respectively, A and B were stored on the roof of the officer quarters on each side of number 1 funnel. There were no davits to lower them, and their weight would make them difficult to launch by hand. Each boat carried, among other things, food, water, and blankets, and a spare life belt. Lifeline ropes on the boat's sides enabled them to save additional people from water if necessary. What do you guys think about that? If there was more lifeboats, people would have survived. I mean, that's just my my personal opinion. So now we could talk about the crew. We talked a little bit about the crew, not highly in depth into the crew in the last podcast, but this time we're gonna go ahead and get into it, and I'm gonna read to you guys about the crew a little bit. So here we go. This is the crew of the Titanic, and some of the members that were aboard. So the Titanic had around 885 crew members on board for her maiden voyage. Like other vessels of her time, she did not have a permanent crew, and the vast majority of crew members were casual workers who only came aboard the ship a few hours before she sailed from Southampton. The process of signing up recruits had begun on 23rd of March, and some had been sent to Belfast, where they served as skeleton crew during Titanic's sea trials, passage to England, and the start of April. Captain Edward John Smith, the most senior of the White Star Line captains, was transferred from the Olympic to the command of the Titanic. There's a lot of speculation about Mr. Captain John John Smith. They call him Mr. John Smith. A lot of speculation about the way he handled the ship and when it, hit the iceberg. And a lot of speculation anyway about that. Mr. Henry Tingle Wild also came across from the Olympic to take the post chief mate. Titanic's previously designated chief mate and first officer William Mr. Murdoch. Everybody knows Mr. Murdoch. And Charles Lightoller were bumped down to the ranks of the first and second class officer, respectively. The original second officer was David Blair. He was also dropped altogether. The third officer was Herbert Pittman, MBE, the only deck officer who was not a member of the Royal Naval Reserve. Pittman was the second to the last surviving officer. Wow. The Titanic's crew were divided into three principal departments: deck with 66 crew, engine with 325, Vindicate, Alien with 494. The vast majority of the crew were thus not seamen, but were either engineers, firemen, or stokers responsible for looking after the engines, or stewards and galley staff responsible for passengers. Of these, over 97% were male. Just 23 of the crew were female, mainly stewardess. Stewardess were female. Interesting. The rest represented a great variety of professions: bakers, cheese butchers, fishmongers, dishwashers, stewards, gymnasium instructors. So they did have personal trainers back then. Laundrymen, waiters, bed makers, cleaners, and even a printer who produced a daily newspaper for passengers called the Atlantic Daily Bulletin, within the latest news received by the ship's wireless operators. Most of the crew signed on in Southampton on the 6th of April, and all 699 of the crew came from there, and 40% were natives of the town. A few specialist staff were self-employed or subcontractors. These included 5 postal clerks who worked for the Royal Mail and the United States Postal Service. Department, the staff of the first class a la carte restaurant and the cafe partisan, the radio operators who were employed by Macaroni, and and the 8 musicians who were employed by an agency, travelers, the second class passengers. Crew varied greatly, with Captain Smith's $105 a month, equivalent to $10,500 today. Wow. The stewardess earned $350 today. The lower paid vindicating staff could, however, supplement their wages substantially through tips for passengers. So that is quite of a lot. But back in those times, it's kind of you would think that is a lot now, but probably was money was worth more then than it is now, correct? Well, maybe vice versa. Wow. So we talked a little bit about passengers. I think there was a lot of high-class people that traveled on the Titanic back in those days. A lot of rich people. So we could talk a little bit about that too. The Titanic passengers numbered approximately 1,317 people. 324 in first class, 284 in second class, and 709 in third class. Of these 869, 66% were male, and 447, 34% female. There were 107 children aboard, largest number of whom were in third class. So most of the children, it seems that they were predominantly poor. I don't mean to say it, but that's what it's saying. The ship was considerably under cap on her maiden voyage, as she could accommodate 2,453 passengers. Wow. Wow. So that's a lot of people, guys. 833 first class, 614 second class, and 1,006 third class. Usually A high prestige vessel like the Titanic could expect to be fully booked on its maiden voyage. However, a national coal strike. There was a coal strike. Did you guys know that there was a coal strike when the Titanic, or before it set sail? And the UK caused a considerable disruption to shipping schedules in the spring of 1912, causing many crossings to be canceled. Why? Why did it do that? Many would-be passengers choose to postpone their travel plans until the strike was over. The strike had finished a few days before the Titanic sailed. However, I need some water. Get some water. All right. For those tuning in, you guys are listening to Vinnie's Talk, man. This is the overview of the Titanic. We are reading biography. We are reading, just learning about the Titanic as we speak. As you guys are watching, you guys are learning about the Titanic with your boy, Vinnie D. I love learning about the Titanic. I love doing podcasts about the Titanic. And to me, it's just very interesting. Just reading about it. And beautiful day to be alive. It's almost Christmas time. So let's get right back into this, guys. The strike had finished a few days before the Titanic sailed. However, that was too late to have much of an effect. The Titanic was able to sail on its scheduled date only because coal was transferred from other vessels which were tied up Southampton, such as the SS City of New York and R.M.S. Oceanic, as well as coal Olympic had brought back from a previous voyage to New York, which had been stored at the White Star Dock. So these are some of the famous people that were aboard here. Some of the most prominent people of the day booked of the passage aboard Titanic traveling in first class. Among them, some of these names, if I mess up on the names, don't quote me on the names, but I'm going to try to pronounce some of them here. Who perished marked with a dagger. First class among them with who perished marked with a dagger. Wow. Were the American millionaire John Jacob Astor. Yes, he was a very famous person. If you guys look him up, we have his wife, Madeline Force Astor, the industrialist Benjamin Guhaman, how you say his name? Painter and sculptor Francis David Millet, Macy's owner, Isidore Strauss. Yes, the very loving Isidore Strauss and his wife Ida. They were the two lovers that were on ship that went down with the Titanic. I don't know if you guys watched the James Cameron film, but they laid in their bed, and on that film they had, you would perceive them as the two couple that were laid in their bed and die as the Titanic ship would go down together. That was the beautiful couple there. Ida, you can hear my dog barking in the background. We have Margaret Molly Brown. We have Cosmo Duff Gordon and his wife, Lucy Lady Duff Gordon. They call her Lady Duff Gordon. That's her nickname, I think. Colonel Arthur Pushin, writer and historian. Businessman John Beer Thayer with his wife Marion and son Jack George Dutton Whiting with his wife Eleanor and his son Harry. A lot of people here, guys. A lot of good people here. So see, these are just some of the famous people that were aboard. There's a lot more. Titanic's owner was J.P. Morgan. He was scheduled to travel the maiden voyage, but had canceled last minute. Also aboard ship were the White Star Line managing director, Bruce Ismay. As you may know, Bruce Ismay, the Titanic's designer, Thomas Andrews, who was aboard to observe any problems and assess the general performance of the new ship. The exact number of people on board is known to not only those who booked tickets made to the ship. About 50 people canceled for various reasons, and not only those who boarded stayed aboard for the entire journey. Ferries vary depending on class and season. Third class ferries from London, Southampton, and Queenstown. Wow. All right, hold on a second. This is the part that probably everybody wants to hear.